what I see a lot of companies doing is that specifically the more really complicated tests where you have a lot of data and you need to run server side, that's fine. But on Tandem, they also run client side tests next to that are less complicated, and it's simply more cost effective to implement it yourself. So even as a mature company, why not go the cost effective route? So definitely both have their ways. I really think it depends on the company, but client-side testing is simply more cost-effective, and server-side testing is more expensive, but a little bit higher quality, a little bit lower risk.
Hey, it's Richard here from the Experimentation podcast, and today I'm going to talk to Jeroen Wiersma from Client NL. I'm going to talk about how to code your own A/B test yourself, the benefits and learnings he's had from it, and some of the common test pitfalls and hints and tips that can make you a good coder with testing. So buckle up your seatbelt, let's get into it. Hello people, it's Richard here from Experimentation, and today I've got Jeroen Wiersma, who's from Plein NL. Plein's a e-commerce website based in the Netherlands. He is a product owner, but a few years ago he started off as a front-end, I believe it was a junior front-end web dev. Then you moved into a CRO role, and then you finally made it into a product manager role. So welcome to the show, Jeroen.
Well, thanks. Happy to be here. Awesome to meet you and talk about CRO.
Yeah. So look, it's great to connect with you finally. It's you're definitely a very technical kind of person. It's good to have a technical person on the show. So tell me how you got started in CRO. How you evolved from being a front end web dev at Plein, and then evolved into being a CRO, and how do you get involved in doing your own A/B test? Because quite often it's jumping in the deep end to go and set up tests, let alone rely on other people and agencies or other devs to develop the tests for you, and you just do a strategy. That's usually the situation in quite a few companies. So yeah, tell me your evolution and how you got from there.
Well, when I started at Plein, there wasn't really any CROers there. They had done a couple of A/B tests in the past, but, and I was just finishing up my studies, so I just started with I did a thesis about mobile usability, and there was an advice in that thesis of doing some tests, but there was nobody to do it. So I had some front-end developer skills, so I was like, okay, maybe I can just try it myself. It weren't the best test, by the way. Maybe some changing button colors, but it's just to get started. So and from then I did it for like 3 years. So 3 years just running on and on tests, getting better at it, and just learning how to implement tests better as well, because there wasn't any other specific CRO person around. I had to do from research to implementation to evaluation.
Yeah.
So the whole process was with me. I did have a little bit of support from an outside agency once. They helped me a little bit with a 1-day course, like, hey, this is how you do CRO.
Yeah.
So
so it was like a workshop. Like, this is the end-to-end process from looking at the data, qualitative and quantitative data, then developing hypotheses and doing a test, test prioritization and roadmap and those sort of things. So was it like a crash course in CRO you find?
Yeah, pretty much. It helped me just with the most important foundations of CRO and the things you should look at, and the mistakes, the common pitfalls you don't want to fall in. Of course, CRO is such a big subject.
Yeah.
You can't learn it in a day. It definitely helped me get started. Yeah.
What's some of the common pitfalls that you made? I mean, because I'm thinking a lot of our readers, our listeners here would be interested in knowing about that, because it's quite common. Well, it's unusual for someone to both be doing strategy and execution at the same time. So how did you do that? How did you deal with that? And yeah, what are some of the common things that you or issues that you came across?
Well, one pitfall is don't do strategy and implementation on your own.
It's hard to be
That's
objective, isn't it? It's hard to both be high level and get into the weeds, into the
uh,
details of doing things.
it just isn't optimal.
Yeah.
It just you can't run quality tests time after time every 2 to 3 weeks while you're trying to do research, implementation, evaluation all on your own. You need a team.
Mhm.
And that's also what by Plein.nl I advise them. Okay, I'm gonna go as a product owner. I'm still gonna be involved with the building of the application, but I'm gonna say, okay, let's get an agency. Specifically, this one was Online Dialogue from Ton Wesseling,
Yep.
and they are doing the full process now, and I think it's going a lot better now. So a pitfall: don't do it all on your own. I think that's a big one. Yeah.
So look, going back to coding, what are the sort of, because you know you've done coding yourself in the test that you also strategized for a while. So what's the main benefits you think a CRO would have from having some basic coding knowledge? Not necessarily that they would be full on coding their own tests, but yeah, what are some benefits from having some coding skills?
I think. The dev market currently, everyone's looking for developers.
Yep.
There's always a problem with the lack of developers.
Yeah.
And what I experience within my company is that a little bit of experience in coding goes a long way because it enables you to run a lot of the tests yourself. I think with if you know a good knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you should be able to do 80 to 90% of the A/B tests on your own. And this means that if you are able to implement these tests, you will be able to run more tests. When you run those tests, the development team only has to make it when it's a winning test.
Yeah.
So that's definitely an interesting one. So it's very cost effective. It's very independent. You will be able to, especially in a small team, you will be able to do more. You don't need to wait for development to put on a new build and okay, this is now on the website and oh wait, the test is broken, but we need to wait another week because the next build is there. So it really makes you flexible. It really puts CRO more on the marketing side of it. And next to that, if you know a little bit of coding, it goes beyond A/B testing because everything these days, especially if you, for me, I'm working in an online retailer. It's all about working with a web shop. So you probably have to work maybe with Tag Manager or some other fancy tool, and then also know those basics. So it goes. It just goes a long way to know a little bit of front end skills when you're working with websites. Definitely, yeah.
Oh, I completely agree with you. I mean, both in terms of you know, not having the devs as a bottleneck, especially in like organizations where CRO is quite new, and you're the only CRO. You don't have a fancy team with an analytics guy, a dev guy in your team. Like it's just you. And I've been in those situations where, yeah, you're waiting on the dev. That's not their job. They're busy building the website or doing other things, and then your thing is like maybe a little favor that they're doing for you, and it's something you're waiting for. Like, you know, you could be waiting weeks or months for things to be put into production, let alone implementing a winning test. So being able to go there and jump into the code and maybe only use the developer if, I don't know, you're stuck or you need someone to QA it or implement a winning test, and that puts a lot less pressure on them. But yeah, I think I agree with you on the other parts of it's not just the A/B testing, but it has cross sort of I don't know, cross platform, or has, you can sort of go laterally into like other things like GTM because, you know, knowing know how to like I don't know track a button clicked by ID or class, like knowing those sort of things. It's requires a little bit of front end knowledge, right? So I completely agree, and it sets you up for a good sort of technical foundation of actually knowing how websites work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And I would say I wouldn't say that developers wouldn't be able to do a better job than
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think that is definitely sometimes the case. But then you would need someone that is specifically assigned to building those tests. I think that is a very uh, that would be the end goal. That was my end
Mm,
goal when working at Plein. Just introducing CRO, getting those first tests, getting those first wins, getting people excited, and then it would be okay. Maybe we need to take that next step and make it a little bit more professional. Get a dedicated test implementer or work with an agency. I think that's definitely the goal you're working towards if you're introducing CRO, and and
mm,
and doing a little bit of coding definitely helps you with reaching something like that.
mm, And I guess it's sort of part of it's the acting as an evangelist, because if you can go and um, do some strategy and code a few tests here and there, get a few wins, then it shows your competency internally in an organization, and you can kind of you can it's easier to be an evangelist in that sense, because you've done it all the you've done all that stuff,
Yeah,
so your career can go a whole a long way, and obviously for you, you've already moved into a product manager role. And look, just as a side topic, you as a product manager, I believe some product managers do A/B testing and get into those side of things. Is that something that you're still involved in a hands-on basis, or just sort of an overview?
currently, since the agency took over, we put
Yeah.
someone else, a junior person, in that role, and someone else is managing that person. But I am still available for expertise in that sense, and also if people need help implementing,
Hmm.
and specifically when tests are won, they
Yep.
got to be put on the product roadmap. So in that sense, I'm definitely still still in the process because I mean, a product owner should work with a CRO person because
Yeah.
that roadmap of hey, where we're going to go with our product should also be based on research. So I'm still heavily involved in that sense, but not like with the hands-on stuff anymore.
Not the
No,
hands-on coding stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
no.
What's the and just going back to the benefits you found with coding. What's the main sort of what would you say the benefit of custom coding a test is compared to using and relying on the WYSIWYG? Now, for our listeners out there, WYSIWYG is just basically the visual component of the website, where you can without much coding knowledge, you can just change like the CTA button or whatever using a tool like VWO or Optimizely.
Yeah, I think the acronym stands for "what you see is what you get," right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think,
that's correct. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, what's the main benefits you found with actually going there and custom coding on a platform like VWO or Optimize Google Optimize, compared to relying on the WYSIWYG?
Okay. Well, I actually, when I really started, I also used the what you get editor
Yeah.
myself, and what I had happened is that a lot of times the more complicated tests I would not be able to implement them with only this piece of tool, or if you would have like a dynamic web page and you would want to change it with a simple visual editor, it would not be possible either, and stuff would break. So I would implement the test, and in the visual editor it looks fine. I'm like, okay, ready to go,
Yeah.
and no, it doesn't work in on the real website because it's changing. It. I mean, sometimes it might work, but it's very limited.
Yeah, I don't know technically why it breaks, but I've encountered this because I was what was I doing? I was putting in some sticky elements on a website. I was making it sticky, but using the WYSIWYG, and it looked fine. Like when you go to preview mode, but then when you go to like say you go incognito in Chrome and you go back on the variation page, it's like all distorted, and different browsers may show the variation differently. So, would you say the learning lesson here is the WYSIWYG is good for very basic tests, like you want to change the CTA button or an image or a headline, but not for more complicated tests on dynamic websites?
Yeah, I think so. I think for changing text is great, and maybe also some little bit of CSS you can also use it. And I think if you have knowledge of coding, you are able to use this WYSIWYG better, because there's also some nuances in when things trigger and when you should implement something. So it also helps you understand it better. But definitely for the more basic test, you can use that. But if you want to get a little bit more complicated, maybe put in a specific rule, or it's a dynamic web page where the page might change depending on where it is, you definitely want to go with JavaScript.
No, that's a good point there. How would someone who's new to coding, that's listening to this podcast, or maybe they've been a strategist for a few years and they don't really think they need to know coding or know very little, like what's a good way for them to learn basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript? Like, do you know any websites that you'd recommend?
Well, if you really have no knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, I when I was in school, I always used the book from John Duckett, HTML, CSS. It's awesome. It also has JavaScript, but this is not specifically catered to A/B testing or in general.
Yeah.
But you also have W3 schools.
Yeah,
it's also one good, which is nice. But I think the most important one, if you really want to learn it, you need to actually try to implement it with something and use it, because otherwise you just won't remember. So if you really want to test it, maybe how I learned it is making your own portfolio website with just HTML, CSS, and looking up some resources, and then you actually get something out of it.
Let's just move on to like sort of hints and tips we can talk about in regards to building out tests, and we talked about flickering and how to avoid it. So could you explain a bit more about that?
I think in order to avoid flickering specifically, if you would do it with JavaScript, there's always a specific way of doing that, and it's called, I'll try not to get too technical, it's called a mutation observer. So don't get scared. A mutation observer is simply like a robot looking at a web page, and he's just waiting for that specific button to load, and then as soon as it loads, bam, it runs the code. So that's a mutation observer. So this in this way, you make sure when something loads, you instantly change it. Usually it's even faster than before it's visible. And this way, the user does not see flickering. The mutation observer itself is a little bit tricky to get a hang of. In my course, I make an entire chapter about how to actually use it and how to change the parameters in it. But if you master that little thing, you should be able to run tests on any website without flickering.
So just to clarify, the mutation observer is just injecting this the code into the DOM, like as soon as an event happens, or
it's pretty much in the name. It's observing the loading of a website, and you tell it, hey, I want you to when this specific element comes up, I want you to run code or do something, and you can write that yourself. That's usually where I wrap the changes in. So if I would want to change the color of a button, for example, I would have a line that does that. But I would always wrap it with a mutation observer, because then it runs when the element appears. Otherwise, what usually happens is the whole web page loads, and then the experiment applies, and then you get this flickering effect, and then
or that delayed sort of effect where it's sort of like you can, like the observer just sort of knows like half a second something's not quite right.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It will just make sure that your user doesn't see both variants. So it's a
Mm.
way of it's a very important way of preventing flickering, or specifically with client-side A/B testing. Yeah.
And what about things like test pollution? I did see on your course description you talked about that. Could you please explain to the audience what test pollution is and how you can avoid that through coding?
Well, so test pollution specifically is, say you're running a test on the product page and you're
Yeah.
making a change on the product page. You want to test something when a user presses the add to cart button.
Yeah.
So if you're if you would run so if you would track every user that would go on that product page, and then you would look at the results, and but only the sessions where they press the add to cart are relevant,
Mm.
because that's what you're testing. But sometimes you don't press the add to cart, but you're still checking it. So you're getting a little bit of test pollution, or maybe not pollution, dilution. So this makes the impact that you need a lot. You need more because you have more sessions. So you need to make more of an impact, because your actual change isn't with every session that is in the test. So
You've diluted, and therefore your experiment will be elongated. The
yeah,
duration will be elongated. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And with coding specifically, where I would use it for, and which is also in my course, uh, because you can use JavaScript specifically in Tag Manager, you are
Yeah.
able to activate an experiment exactly at the time that you want. So what I would do is I would write some code, and with Google Tag Manager, I would say, hey, when someone presses an add to cart on the product page, then start the experiment. So this way, your test isn't diluted by all those other sessions that are not relevant to the test. And this is something you can
That's
very
smart.
easily do if you know some JavaScript skills. And you
And,
don't have
and
to do it with Tag Manager, but anywhere where you can just run a little bit of JavaScript before the test runs, that'll work.
yeah. And you say do you explain this in your course?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I have a whole lesson about specifically that, and there I do with Tag Manager. So
cool. Yeah.
I just tell people to how to activate an experiment based on an event.
That's very useful. And look, lastly, just talking about server side versus client side testing. Server side's become the whole rage now in the last few years. It's not something I'm personally familiar with. I'm a lot more familiar with client side testing, like most listeners here. Like VWO, Google Optimize, where you just basically just edit the DOM. Comments on server side. Any pointers in regards to coding? Things you've got to be aware
Well,
of.
most tools these days usually also have a server side. Just look in their documentation; they will have a way to implement a server side test, because it's the hot race. They want to get into that, but I think server side testing. We were talking about specifically flickering and how to avoid it with client
Mm,
side. You need disputation observer. Okay, well, server side testing is really you don't have any flickering,
yeah.
because you're running the test from the server. So to explain it non-technically, you have a browser, it loads the page, and it makes changes. So what
Hmm.
happens with server-side testing, before it goes to the browser, it's already changed. So you can never see the flickering. So that is one of the main upsides of server-side testing. The thing I do not enjoy, and why client-side testing is very much relevant, and a lot of people do it, more people than server-side testing, is only a developer can really run server-side tests, because you run from the back end. You probably need to be a back-end developer as well, and need
Yeah.
to work together with a team. But I think in like bigger organizations with a big team that want to run multiple tests, and I think building a server-side tool or using one and implementing all the tests that way, it's expensive, but it's definitely good for your tests. The quality of your tests increases. Yeah.
And would you say that that's something that an organization would do as they mature over the years? Like, I mean, you think client side would be something you do like when you're first starting out because it's so much more accessible and easy to do, even if you don't know how to code, you can just use the WYSIWYG. Whereas server side, you like it sounds like it's something that's kind of like for more mature um, CRO organizations. Would you agree with that?
Mm, it's usually what happens. I think
Yeah.
what goes in tandem with that is that it moves. It's a little bit of professionalism in the developer side because when you run it server side, it usually gets. I mean, we talked before about the downfall of using a developer. You need to wait for them in the production
Yeah.
side. But if that developer actually has the time for that and is well integrated in the dev team and is working with the CRO team, and it can go along with that velocity of testing,
Yeah.
it really works very well. And I think what you're saying with the maturity of the company, with the maturity of a CRO team, I think that's definitely a way to go. I wouldn't say that client-side testing isn't something mature companies would not do, because what I see a lot of companies doing is that specifically the more really complicated tests where you have a lot of data, you need to run server side, that's fine. But on Tandem, they also run client side tests
Mm.
next to that are less complicated, and it's simply more cost effective to implement it yourself. So even as a mature company, why not go the cost effective route? So I definitely both have their ways. I really think it depends on the company, but client side testing is simply more cost effective, and server side testing is more expensive, but a little bit higher quality, a little bit lower risk.
So maybe the server side is like driving a Ferrari, whereas client side might be like driving a Toyota Corolla, or like it does a
I,
job and
I think so. Yeah,
it's
I,
fine,
I,
but it's not it's not going to drive. It's not going to go from 0 to 100 in like 3 seconds.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's obviously it's better if you have the resources and money for it, and
Yeah.
actual changes that like the with the CXL course, it talked about how you can predict how much extra revenue you can get. I mean, if that supersedes the extra cost you need for your development team to run such a process, go
Mm.
ahead and do it. I mean, it's probably better if you're a really big organization. But if you just have come to the benchmark of, oh, testing is going to be viable, you might want to start out with client side testing with a little bit of more less expensive tool, and just get started with some of the more basic tests, and then maybe
Mm.
learn some coding, and then get a little bit more advanced and get your first wins, and then move on to making it better and better.
And like you said, like starting off with doing easy tests using maybe free tools like Google Optimize, you can sell the CRO program better to the organization. And once you get those early wins, hopefully, you'll be able to initiate some change management further down the line to move to server side if that's something that suits you. Um, cool. So look, it's we've had a good chat about how you got started into doing um, A/B testing as a CRO, some of the common pitfalls that one can get involved when they start out doing coding, and some of the hints and tips, including server side and how to prevent flickering and those sort of things. Listen, Jeroen, how can people contact you off, out there in the big wide world?
Uh, LinkedIn, definitely. Just type my name, Jeroen Wiersma, on LinkedIn. You'll find me. You can connect me with me. You can also go to my website,
Yep.
which is a little bit hard to pronounce, but jeroenwiersma.com. I'll make sure to put it in the comments somewhere if it's posted online. But you can contact me via there, or that's usually the way that people go. Just send me an email. I'm
And
always up for a conversation.
that's cool. And look, a bit of a shameless plug. You've got a course here. I think it's really good. I've been meaning to like pay for the course myself. I'll do it straight after this podcast. But Can you tell our listeners, your course that you've made and how it's going to benefit them?
Well, I think uh, my course is specifically for a conversion optimizer that's
Yep.
maybe running in a marketing team and that's just simply wants to run their own tests. So basically, the person that is now using the visual editor and you just want to be able to do more by
Mm.
simply following my course. It's not even that long. You'll get the basics of using JavaScript with HTML, CSS,
Yep.
and you'll make sure to fight those common pitfalls of preventing flickering and making sure to activate the test in the right way. And it'll also get you a very basic understanding of how to use JavaScript. So it will just level up your game in online in technical marketing specifically. And I'm sure that you don't really need a lot of technical experience. If you know a little bit of HTML, you can follow my course. You should be able to run a bunch of awesome A/B tests that you couldn't do before. So that's my course in a nutshell. Yeah.
Awesome. So that's Jeroen. Thanks for coming to the show, and we'll see you next time, guys.
Thanks.